Hi, friends. Welcome to the Genesis of Shame podcast. I'm your host, Sam Landa, and I'm here to help you speak biblical truth to the shame you experience in relationships. My hope is that you grow in your understanding of how shame impacts you so you can learn how to connect with God and others. If you've experienced fear, hiding who you are, boundary issues, anxiety, and/or depression in your relationships, then this podcast is for you. It's time to speak truth to your shame. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Genesis of Shame podcast. And this used to be Created to Connect podcast, if you guys remember. And it's obviously changed now because of a couple of things that have happened in the last couple of months. But specifically, one of the things that I was noticing in the last season and even within my counseling experiences, how shame was such a critical component to relationships. People would identify themselves by the messages that they would receive from people in their lives, and these people were usually people who loved them, people who were close to them, and it impacted how they viewed themselves. So with that, and a lot of the guests that I have on this season, we talk about shame, and we talk about the different areas in which shame is involved. We talk about how it's involved in the church. We talk about its involvement in the family. We talk about it in culture and the society at large. So we see it everywhere. And that's kind of what led me to make this shift to focusing on this aspect of shame in our relationships. So I have some really great people on for this season, and I'm really excited for you to be here. And today I'm talking with a good friend of mine. His name is Rob Clements, and we talk about the very heated issue of race, race relations here in our country. So this is, just to give you guys a little bit of background, my friend Rob and I, we've known each other for about 10 years now. So this is a very honest conversation about race. So we basically just talk about it, and we address a lot of different things. And there's really nothing that we really hold back. We just ask whatever's on our mind, and we try to answer as respectfully as we can, which is something that's lost today in talking about such a sensitive issue. So I hope you enjoy it. And when you hear it, we weren't planning on talking about it, but as I was getting ready to record, we did start talking about it, and I just made it as a separate segment for us to discuss. So it might seem, at least in the beginning, like it doesn't really flow, but that's because I wasn't planning on doing this, but I think it was important, so that's where you're going to catch it. So enjoy, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Thanks. So what is that then? When you say, like, for example, obviously right now with everything that's going on, when you say, like, it's a feeling that I get.
Sometimes you can tell just how people interact with you, or how they'll look at you. And obviously you try not to read into it too much, but you are aware of, like, because one day I forgot my wallet. Since I've been living in this new place, I've been forgetting my wallet often. Mm-hmm. So, and Caleb was like, why don't you just tell them, hey, can I take this order? When I get home, I'll pay for it over the phone. I said, Caleb, I don't know what world you live in, but you can't do that. He's like, oh, I've done that before. And people were like, yeah, that's fine. I was like, yeah, you're white. You can think like that. Mm-hmm. We can't think like that. I showed up at the restaurant, forgot my wallet. Mm-hmm. And so I had to cancel the order because I said I would have to go all the way back home and gotcha. Yeah, so I was like, and she understood, so she just canceled it. Mm-hmm. And Kayla's like, well, why don't you just take your food and just call them when you got home and pay for it over the phone? And I was like, Caleb, it don't work that way. Yeah. He's never really had to think that way, or some people never really had to think that way. Like, my parents always taught me, when you go to the stores, you never carry your hands in your pocket. You don't wear hoodies in the car. Mm-hmm. And you don't go run at night, and you don't wear a certain attire. Mm-hmm. Right. So they give us a list of rules to do, And they always give us that conversation. If a police does pull you over, you do not argue with them, no matter how much you disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
So we got those talks very ongoing.
And your dad was a cop too, so I guess he understood.
He explained the
everything.
same thing because he would hear his stuff. I mean, actually, at a time my dad was driving us. He picked us up from my mom's house. He left night shift, still in his cop uniform, in his Cadillac. Picked us up one morning, and as he was bringing us back, my sister was sitting in the back of the car with her hoodie on. I was sitting in the front, and my dad was driving. So this cop pulls us over, turns the lights on and pulls us over. And we're still in Virginia. And so my dad's looking at speed, and my dad's like, I'm not speeding. And he said, all my tags, everything was updated. So my dad complied. He pulled over. So my dad just sits there, and the guy comes walking really slow to the car. Leans in, sees my dad's a cop. He said, have a nice day, sir. And didn't tell us why he pulled us over. Didn't do any of that. He just...
Your dad had his uniform on?
He had his uniform on.
Oh.
So my dad said this is what he did. He said he saw a Cadillac, he saw Maryland tags, and he saw your sister in the back with a hoodie on. And he said, there's certain cops like that. That's all they need to profile because they know they'll think they'll get something.
Are they trying to meet a quota? Like are they trying to make certain stops?
Some cops do make they have to meet a quota. One of my friends are cops. He said they have to get so many speeding tickets, and they have to. It's kind of like so stupid. So he said he doesn't really follow that, but I mean, I think some of them, and if you think deeper about it, I think as counselors we do that too.
What, profile?
I think we profile.
Yeah.
And we all profile, but they're in a position where they're a little bit more in the spotlight when they profile.
Yeah.
I mean, even in our own culture, we profile.
Right.
I'm an African American, and I see another African American that looks sketchy. I'm profiling them.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just aware too because, even for me, if I go running in a neighborhood, I tend to either run early in the morning. And if I run anything after 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, I always run with Leah. Mm-hmm. They tend to think you're more friendly with a dog.
Right.
They're more likely not to cause alarm or anything. There's been plenty of times where if I'm running by myself and if a white woman is walking towards me, she will stop and cross the street. Mm-hmm. If I'm running with Leah, she stays on the street. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She'll walk right past me because it's a dog. You've got to be fine. You have a dog. Mm-hmm. And it's a friendly dog. It's not a pit bull. It's not a Rottweiler.
Right.
All right?
That's true. Yeah.
So, and they're more likely to talk to you if you have a dog.
Yeah. It's true. And for us, the big thing was the gangster look, which was... Back then it was white t-shirt or white t-shirt, blue jeans or baggy jeans, and that was the same thing. And so I mean, to your point, we're always profiling. So the question is, at what point does it become racism?
I think it becomes racism once you, in my mind, that you can't get away from the idea of they're not this kind of person. Like, for instance, so
you can't do that on a first meet basis. It has to be you're getting to know them, which is not what's common, though, right? Yeah. That's not what happens usually. I mean, even when we met, I mean, obviously I didn't have any issues with you. It was more about, hey, we just started taking class together, and we, I think it was once I got involved in the ACC that we started to get closer. But profiling. Yeah. Yeah, so there's no profiling done. It was more of a matter of, do I like you as we get to know each other? Do I like you or not? And what people were saying about you or what people were saying about me was debunked once we got to know each other, So that's what I think. So, yeah, I agree with that. I think once you know the person, then you can say, yeah, they've been acting a certain way towards me. But if you don't know the person, I think it's hard to make that evaluation.
It is, but sometimes, for me, it's easy for me to make that evaluation if I'm standing with someone who is white and they don't know either of us. And I watch how they treat both of us.
Yes, yeah, I can agree.
So
even if they know the person?
If they don't know
don't know either one of you guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, if they know them, it's a little different.
Right.
But, there's been situations where on Windhurst, I don't strategically, Chuck doesn't know this, but I don't have my picture up there on purpose.
Right. So I looked you up today because I was trying to see how you schedule appointments and so on. And yeah, that was really interesting because I saw most of them up there. I'm like, but he's been working there for a while now. They usually put those up. Yeah.
Chuck's tried to take a picture like 2 or 3 times. And I'm like, oh, I don't have the right thing on, and then he forgets. But
yeah.
I do it on purpose. I do it on purpose because I can't tell you how many actually. Most of my clientele are white, and I've had a few of them that said, when I first met you, I didn't really think I was going to click with you. So what they're saying is, when I first saw you, I didn't think like.
Yeah.
And then after a while, they're like, oh, he knows he knows what he's talking about. Like I had a client, and I'll never forget. I went and got her. When I walked out there, and she's probably like in her 40s, Caucasian woman, and her husband, and they looked at each other like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? Like they had that look, and they just kind of stared at each other, and so I kind of stood at the door, and she was like, "Are you Robert?" And I said, "Yeah," and she kind of like looked at her husband again and made like a face. And she never really made eye contact in the session or anything like that. I mean, and I asked her questions, and she wouldn't tell me why she disliked her son's girlfriend. And so then I started picking up, oh, her son's girlfriend is black. So, and then I started, oh, well, how do you want to set your next appointment? She's like, oh, we can set one up for next week. And I was like, she's not coming back. And so then she scheduled it, and then she called and canceled it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing those conversations, obviously, when you're having that with a client, for example, one of the big things that hard for me is when you have a person coming in with a different worldview. So it's more of a worldview thing for me, which is where I think a lot of the discussion kind of points to today, is that I wonder if it's worldviews more than race.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it's cultures, because there's different cultures in the African American cultures. When you go to HBCU, we still segregate. We still find ways to segregate. I will say, I think sometimes as us African Americans, we're not as vocal about our own segregation. So, like when I went to Hampton for the summer, most of us segregated by area code.
Interesting.
Yeah, you're 202, you're DC, you're 757, you're Virginia Beach, or you are Miami or Philly. And I remember being at a little pep rally, and they were all yelling their area codes. And I'm thinking to myself, you're at a HBCU, you're all African Americans, and you're still finding a way to segregate. So this is how they break it down. Then they have different sororities and fraternities. And then everyone kind of are social, but they have their own cliques. We still pull away, and we still segregate.
Right.
Based off culture. Yeah. So that sometimes they bring up that question, all right, the biggest segregation we have is on churches on Sunday. Well, yes and no. It's about preferences sometimes. Sometimes you'll see, like, white people go to a black church, or you see black people go to a white church because it's a preference and style that they like. Necessarily, it's not always a race thing. Like our church is multiracial because if they bring in different styles of worship, they kind of mix gospel and Christian worship. They have multiracial worship team, which seems more inviting, but the style speaks to different cultures. It's just not a black gospel style, which would probably bring in a lot of white culture because they wouldn't understand. It doesn't make them racist. Just they don't understand that culture.
Right. One of the things that I'm thinking through a lot, obviously, is kind of the whole racial divide. Even now, as we're talking about it, is this going to solve anything? I mean, every single year, something happens, and we say we need to talk about it, and we talk about it. So you and I can continue being the same, but what change is actually created outside of that? And that's my only issue with it. It's not It's not whether or not we're helping the community or not. It's that every single year or every single time something big happens, we say, we need to talk about it. Mm-hmm. We need to talk about it for what? Mm-hmm. There's no change that happens. Maybe you get that emotional high for that moment. Mm-hmm. Where you're talking to your friends, you're talking to all these different people, and you're saying, oh, I'm doing my part. Mm-hmm. But after that, you go back to your circles. You go back to your friends. You go back to your family, and no change happens. Mm-hmm. That's my frustration. I don't know how you feel about that, or if you see the same thing.
No, yeah. I agree with you. I think it's actually both parties. If we're just comparing white and black, I think it comes down on both parties. I don't really think sometimes as African Americans we do a good job of having enough patience and understanding and educating some of our Caucasian brothers and sisters. Other side, I don't think sometimes our Caucasian brothers and sisters, not everyone, I think sometimes they're not willing to learn other cultures and understand differences. And sometimes that takes effect in the counseling world. Sometimes as an African American, you have to speak up for African American clients that your Caucasian coworkers are working with, and they don't understand their behaviors and their culture, and they call it a personality disorder. And it's not a personality disorder. And I had that, I think Dr. O'Hare is the one who kind of brought that to my attention when we were in grad school, and she was just talking about how sometimes different cultures do different things, and we have to be careful as therapists that we will say, well, that's a personality disorder. Like sometimes Asians don't make eye contact because of a culture thing. And we can sit there and say, maybe they're schizoaffective, maybe they're avoidant personality because, this is how they see things. Or they may have a very traditional Hispanic male. They finally got into therapy, and he has a machismo thing going on. And a Caucasian therapist could say, well, he has some grandiose tendencies, and so we might be looking at some bipolar or narcissism. Well, no.
Is that what you thought about me?
There you go. I was thinking more borderline. I always feel that need.
Oh, God.
But I think that's kind of what I saw, and even for me getting, they told us in Liberty, you should get your own therapy. And I was like, yeah. The problem was
you never did it, right?
Actually, I sort of did.
You did?
Yeah. Okay. I never, and thankfully God provided it for us. I never could find someone that looked like me or understood me from my eyes standpoint. And this is why I think sometimes, even as African Americans, we have to be careful in thinking only African Americans can understand us. In reality, I think it was such a blessing that Dr. Brooks and Dr. Daniels, when they did that group with us, they showed me that they don't have to be an African American to understand some of my tendencies. And actually, they helped me understand some of what I was grasping on in my culture was actually prohibiting me from my own growth. Because in our culture, it's not really acceptable that back then that you go get therapy. No one really did. You just go to a preacher and you prayed about it, and you rely on your family and your village, and you don't really express your emotions. So no one in our family really taught us how to express your emotions. You keep things in, you joke about it, you cook, and you move forward. Whereas Brooks and Dr. Daniels, Dr. Brooks as well. I just say Brooks.
Yeah,
Dr. Brooks and Dr. Daniels, what they did was they challenged my ability to understand my own thoughts and my own person outside of my culture, which I thought was powerful. And I think it was such a life-changing. I think that's one of the reasons I'm able to have healthier relationships. But also, too, Dr. Brooks used me for like 4 or 5 or 6 times in her classes doing her individual.
That's right.
And I think that was kind of like the final touch-up that I needed in a way. Because she was able to help me articulate who I was outside of my family and my culture. Because I think sometimes we, as minorities, and maybe I should just speak for me, I found it very easy to get lost just in your culture and not really have to explore yourself. 'Cause, yes,
or outside of that even.
You know. And I was talking to a friend who grew up in a very traditional Caucasian culture, and he just said he always felt he never could really click with it, and then he started hanging around our family and different minorities, and he found stuff that he enjoyed, and he said, oh, I can take this and apply it to what I like about my culture, and I think that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there's stuff that we can learn from Caucasians and Hispanics and Asians. I think there's a lot of stuff we can learn from each other's cultures. But it's about being able to have that conversation objectively.
Which is hard.
Which is really hard because there's a lot of emotions. And
right.
That's what I learned during my therapy was your unprocessed trauma will come out.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a racial experience and be traumatized by it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has to be traumatizing for a police officer to illegally search you or to be assaulted or anything like those things can be traumatizing. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Where I get mixed emotions is when it comes down to this, what we're, you know, the law enforcement and Black Lives Matter is my dad was a cop and he was a black cop.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's people out there who say, we don't need police officers. Well, yeah, we do. We just need the right police officers.
Mm-hmm.
If you look closely, any profession can have unhealthy people.
Right.
As you know, and I know.
Yeah.
Not everybody's meant to be a therapist.
Right.
There are unhealthy therapists, and I can't tell you how many times we have to clean up behind therapists. There's a difference between you go see someone and say, hey, I didn't really click with Robert. He didn't do anything unethical. I'm going to go with this person. That's different. You know? It's when you have a therapist, and I've heard some crazy stories. I had a therapist, heard a patient say a therapist that was like, you know, looking at the clock, and then the therapist would tell stories about their lives. Like, they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's even unhealthy therapists. I've met racist therapists before.
Mm.
And I know it just because of what the words are coming out their mouths, because how they describe their African and Latino clients, they would say, oh, they're ghetto, or they're, you know, they're probably they're just probably not even, you know, legal. I mean, comments like that, ignorant comments like that. So it's not just police officers. You can have racist doctors. You can have racist nurses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can have racist waiters or servers. It's just not police officers.
Yeah, and they're doing it to serve.
They're doing it to serve. I get it. You know, police brutality in Blackstein, and then I get that part. But you know, I've been around. Some of my good friends are cops, and they're solid guys. Yeah, and they're very fair. You know, they're very fair people. So I think it's a very complex issue. And we need leaders to take hold of the conversations.
Right. Well, hold the conversations and also create the change that's wanted. So, for example, I mean, right now it's it's not a good thing in Minneapolis. Now they want to defund the police. Mm-hmm. That's going to create more crime in the area, more murders, more homicides, because now you let the people be their own law. Mm-hmm. So that's a bad move on their part.
This is my own theory, and I'm not saying I've looked into the numbers or anything like this. I think they've always been like this.
They being
like the killings, like what we're hearing, that they're being overlooked. Like the one where the cops rush into this woman's house who's playing video games with her nephew, and they just shoot and kill her in her own house, and they were going to just leave it alone. You know, like what were we going to do with that? Or, you know, you have someone who's in, like, there was another couple where they arrested the husband and then killed his wife, or they had this mistaken identity, or, you know, there's all these different cases. One is too many, you know. And I think where people are losing their trust with our law enforcement is that our law enforcement, they're trying to slap risk and hide it, rather than saying, you know, this person should be fired. Not, hey, we're going to give you 3 or 4 weeks with time off, and you're going to have all your money and all your benefits. We're going to give you a paid vacation while we work this out.
Right.
They're sending the wrong message.
Right. And I'm on board with that. I mean, if someone makes a mistake, you have to address it from within, right?
That's right.
It's funny. I don't know if you see this. um, in the African American community, but do you see that they call each other out, or do you see it as more of a pass? In Hispanic communities, we call each other out. If you do something bad, like they'll chew you out before they say anything else because you represent the Hispanic community.
Yeah, I think African Americans do that too. They have a thing they call Black Twitter. On Twitter, there's a lot, in the Black community on Twitter. I mean, if you say something wrong in the African American community, they will chew you out.
Mm-hmm.
They'll roast you.
Yeah.
They call it Black Twitter. I mean, and you can go on comments for them like they're going after Candace Owens or celebrity or Kanye West or Gabrielle Union or Monique when she was doing this whole Netflix thing. I mean, they were roasting them or controversial issues. So yeah, they do that. Mm-hmm.
But those are big stars. I'm talking like within their actual communities. Like, for example, when you hear black on black crime.
Yeah.
Right. That's a big issue. So are they telling themselves, is this happening within the communities, and are they saying, hey guys, we need to stop this, and also addressing the police brutality aspect?
I think they are. I think there are a lot of people out there who are trying to do that. I don't think we just hear about it though. From my perspective, from what I've seen, like in DC, like watching different organizations and talking to different people in the network and how they try to develop programs to help decrease black on black crime and things like that. I think what continues black on black crimes is just my theory. I think
family.
Huh?
The family, breaking down the family.
I think
which is with everything.
Well, I think it's the absence of males in our community.
Yeah.
I think out of all the races, I think we have the most absent fathers. I think in this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think in the Hispanic culture, the Hispanic males are more likely to stay than our father. And I think that has something, especially as therapists, we know that how much impact it has when a father is removed out of a picture.
Yeah.
And I think of the impact, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why our community is the way it is. There's not enough strong, healthy males to lead. So like if you go online and look, they have different communities of fathers who were walking fatherless kids to school.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Hand clapping, and I think that's what's really missing in the African American culture, and I think that's why we enter these gangs and why we do these things. As you start studying people, we start acting out at young ages.
Right.
And the African American clients that I've worked with, to hear their stories about being passed around from family member to family member. The benefit for our culture is we stay pretty knitted in our village, but sometimes our village is not healthy, and so sometimes we're not verbal about certain things. It's that whole saying, don't say nothing. Well, he molested me. Well, don't tell nobody that. Don't out them.
Yeah.
So I think that's hurt our community as well. So I think there's various things, but no, I agree. I think there's got to be a lot of conversation within the African American culture and with other cultures.
Yeah.
There are some Caucasian brothers and sisters who are willing to have those conversations and willing to learn. And sometimes they're not racist, they're just ignorant in their responses. Like the one I used to get when I had hair was like, oh, you can't grow an afro? Well,
what the heck? Are you serious?
Yeah, I would get that all the time, and I would just have to say, I had to educate them. It's like, not all African Americans can grow afro.
Yeah.
I said, I have a lot of European and Indian descent, so we don't grow, we have different kind of hair. And so a lot of them are like, oh, that makes sense. And they said, we never knew that because that, that's what was always portrayed to us. Right. But, and then there's some who don't understand that and like, well, that don't make sense. Aren't y'all all the same? There's differences. I've had that response too. So I mean, I think it's about education. I really love when John.
I like my favorite one. It's like, you don't like hot sauce? No, I don't like salsa. I don't like anything hot. Yeah. Or you want some tacos? Why? Because I'm Mexican.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, man, and some people, they don't even know they do it. They be like,
you can tell when it's with ill intent.
Yeah. They like, I remember one time someone was like, how do you, they asked me, this one white girl said, how do you know if a watermelon's like really good? I said, I don't know, I don't eat watermelon. And she said, I'm so sorry. She's like, I just said, it's all right. I mean, I just don't, I said, I'll eat watermelon flavored stuff, but I just don't like watermelon.
Right.
And I don't drink Kool-Aid. I do love fried chicken, yes, but we're not all the same, you know what I mean? Like, they get mind blown, like, yeah, there are vegan African Americans out there.
Yeah.
I mean, all of us eat chitlins and pig feet and all these. We don't all do that, and they don't know that, right? And they don't know that because they were taught something in their homes by family members. And let's have a real conversation. So if African Americans are listening to me about this, I would be surprised they didn't have this. You heard stuff about white people in your home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was taught growing up, like, be careful because sometimes, your white friends will try to get you to do stuff that they can get away with and you can't. Which is partially true, which is partially always true. Like, and thought like that. Like, they'd be like, oh, let's go. I remember one of my friends were like, hey, let's go into because we didn't have all the stuff Liberty had now, so we had to make our own food.
Right.
And they were like, hey, let's go on this private property and tip these guys' cows over in the middle of the night. Well, one, y'all can do that in Lynchburg in Central Virginia. And the farmer might say, they're just kids being kids, but if he spots the light and sees me, my chances of getting shot and killed on property are pretty high. And they could not comprehend that. They said, well, Robert, that doesn't really happen. That doesn't really, happen. And it's just kind of like, they're not willing to accept that we're different.
Yeah. And
some of my Caucasian friends, not that they're ignorant or racist, sometimes they're in strong denial, even with their own family. Like I said, I've dated outside my race quite a few times, and it will come down to that. They will learn your family is really not fond of being connected to the African American culture. You're okay with me as an African American as long as I am doing within your culture. As long as I'm listening to the music you listen to and we go to the places you're familiar with. But the moment I, as an African American, start talking about things from my culture and I lose you, then you say we are not compatible. I cannot erase being African American.
Right.
So I think there's just certain things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I've learned that some are willing to learn and some aren't.
Right.
And that's just part of it.
Do you see also, like, with mixed kids, like, did they have it harder too? I just had a conversation last week or saw someone write something about being mixed. And they say, I have a struggle because obviously my mom or dad is white and my other parent is black or Mexican or whatever. And then they'll say, so I always have to fight what side to take, and I hate being put in that spot because, I agree with both. But why do I have to choose? And then I'm ousted or I'm treated differently because I have to pick a side. Or just other people don't understand. They'll criticize me for not taking on my, my whiteness or my blackness or my Hispanicness, whatever. They'll just say something like that. Do you see them struggling with that too? Like, are they in that position?
Yeah, my family, we went through that. I mean, just being a lighter skinned African American, and I would have my African American friends say, you have that quote unquote good hair, you're not black enough, or your white friends would say, oh, you're too dark. I mean, you fall right in that line. So sometimes you get discrimination from both sides. Yeah. But you experience that quite often.
So how do you deal with it, right?
How I end up dealing with it? I ended up looking at people just as people. There are some African Americans that were just going to be on my side and some weren't. True. And there were some Caucasians who were going to be on my side and some weren't. And there's some, I had to start looking at people. I'm not going to say I didn't see color. I saw color. Right. But sometimes you have to look at it as a person. Just because we both black don't mean you always on my side. Right. And some of my closest friends I've met in recent years, they've been white, but they've also been to the point where they are very accepting of my culture and of who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Where sometimes where I've encountered where some African Americans have told me, like, when I've gone, back to my community or things like that, it's like, oh, you sophisticated, you're high stidity now. Oh, I can't remember the time I got called an Uncle Tom and a Jerry Falwell lover.
You were called that?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Dang.
And and I just was kind of like, it has nothing to do about a Jerry Falwell lover or anything like that. I honestly, and I will still say this to this day, I really felt God led me to Liberty, and to this day, as much stuff Liberty is going through now, I don't regret my education from Liberty. I don't regret my experience from Liberty. I think Liberty challenged me spiritually. I think Liberty challenged me culturally. I think I think the growth that I received at Liberty, I think the Lord knew that I had to get it from Liberty. So I was okay with that. And I had a lot of African Americans say, "Aren't you worried about having a degree from Liberty?" I said, here's the difference between,
Really?
yeah, I said, and I told them, I said, here's the difference between me and you. I'm not worried about what man's going to see. I'm more concerned about being obedient. And it's paid off. God's constantly provided.
Rob's a big shot.
Yeah. He has provided in so many ways that I can't even fathom or think. And my experience at Liberty, I learned there are some white people who are willing to walk alongside of us, but we as African Americans, I think, sometimes have to help educate them on what we need. It's almost like in therapy, you have to communicate what you need. And I think sometimes as African Americans, we don't know what we need. Yeah. And sometimes we do. Sometimes we do know what we need. I think sometimes we don't. I'm not saying everyone, but, we have to communicate those. And you're right. If they don't listen, go somewhere else.
Right.
It's just us, but that's just part of it, I think. And that's helped me at my time at Liberty and even at Centra. It's just educating and telling them, kind of what I feel and what I've experienced. If I've experienced anything, like my RA, he did not tolerate that. I mean, he was very outspoken against anyone who showed any racial discrimination or prejudice. So, and I really, really appreciate that. About my RAs. I had some really good RAs and leadership, but I mean, it was prevalent. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Well, that wasn't our topic for today, and it's not our topic for today, but I may use this a little special for side thing. But yeah, man, that's good, and I think that's really important. I'm just hoping that if it is fighting for a change, that people actually do make the change, because you can only impact the circles that you're in.
Right. I agree. But I also think this was kind of one of the last straws for a lot of people, especially being so close to that guy. I know they're still investigating the one they just shot and killed.
Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah, yep. I mean, I think the thing is, and I've been seeing a lot of people post about it, is I think, and I loved it, and it just says, as African Americans, we are just tired. And I think that's accurate. I think we're just getting tired of it. I think we're getting tired of hearing it on the news. I think we're getting tired of watching certain things play out, and I think they're just getting drained from the experience, because a lot of people, they have black sons, they have black daughters. My mom always says, as a black female, you come in with, you're already born with two handicaps. You're black and you're a female. And she was right, and she said so she had to work harder in her corporations to prove herself. And as African American male, I've done that in some settings as well. But I think, watching the treatment and watching these things play over and over again, I think it brings some anxiety and fear that we have to kind of go back to that mindset of how we're going to protect our culture, how we're going to protect our kids. Even for myself, I've always still get cautious whenever I get pulled over. And I've been pulled over, and not for speeding. It's always because my old car, I could never change my tail light, so I was always getting pulled over. And by the grace of God, every time they've never issued me a ticket. They were just always very understanding. They said, yeah, stuff happens, and they'll send me on my way. But a lot of times they would see the badge and they would leave me alone. Unless they see a Centra badge but I mean, I think we're just getting tired and getting concerned. And I still, even though I'm not doing anything wrong, I always, and I say always, I'm always cautious on how I behave in a store or when I walk around a neighborhood or I'm always cautious about where I'm going, what setting I'm going in, what time I'm going, and what I'm wearing in that setting. So I wear my hoodie mostly around the house or a friend's house. And if I go out, it's got to be a well-lit place. It's got to be a place where it's not going to cause an issue for me wearing a hoodie. And so, you know, as African-American, sometimes I have to think twice about my attire, what I'm driving, certain little things like that. So I think sometimes I think that's what it is. But I agree with you. I think there's got to be some type of change, something we got to talk about or something we got to bring up. But I think I felt like this George Floyd stuff was a little different.
Okay.
I think this is the first time for me, and I could be wrong, I think this is the first time I've seen a lot more Caucasian support. And I've had a lot of Caucasian friends, or even some of my other minority friends, reach out to me. And I think this did something to them, and I think this was the turning point. That's how I feel. I don't know what's going to be like, but I've never seen this much strong reaction from other people saying, because one of my friends said, you know, Rob, I'm worried this could happen to you. You know, he said you could be walking Leah and someone can call the cops on you because you walked on their grass, and they can gun you down and make a story out of it. You know, so I think that's just the concern that people are having. Yeah.
So you're seeing a shift. You've seen a shift with this one.
In my world, I've seen a shift. I think watching just with my Facebook friends, I've seen a lot of my African American friends or either my white friends too. They've been more vocal on Facebook saying, you know, we can disagree about a lot of things, but racism isn't one of them.
Right.
And I've watched a lot of my white friends remove some of their family members and friends because of their comments on Facebook. I watched my African American friends remove some comments that people are making too, and they were like, "Oh, remove you." I've watched even some of my friends who are actually, and I've talked to about them before, and they kind of were grasping what I'm saying, but now they're actually grasping more what I'm saying. Say, hey, you know, tell me more about your experience. And I just feel like there's a lot more draw to it. I mean, it's just interesting.
No, that's good. Yeah. That's good. Whatever part we can play in that, even through having this discussion, you know, hopefully it helps change some hearts, at least open it up. But yeah, I do hope for change. I really do. We've gone a good while, bud, and I know you have stuff to do, but I still want to talk more. If you're still okay with it, we can still do it. Yeah. You good?
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you again for tuning into today's episode with my friend Rob and I as we discuss the very difficult topic of race. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it kind of ended a little weird. Like I said, we weren't planning on discussing that issue for the podcast, but we did. And I was able to make it a special segment here for you guys. So again, just thank you for tuning in. If you are not yet subscribed to the podcast, please do so on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify, so you can get all the latest updates on each episode. And if you'd like to support the show, please click on that link as well, and I will greatly, greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good one.